All right. So good morning, everybody. It's our last day, and the beat goes on and on and on. We are here today with Tammy Brown and Jason Evers from Wayne RESA and Dr. Jendayi Gardner from Detroit Public Schools. They are going to share with us about A+ monitoring. If you could just make sure that you stay muted during the presentation unless you are going to talk. They will take questions throughout. If you just throw them in the chat, I'll monitor the chat box. And with that, we can get started.
Thank you, Whitney. First thing we're going to do this morning, or actually, I guess, is it considered afternoon if it's after 11? We're going to have each of our presenters introduce themselves. My name is Tammy Brown. I am the director of Troy Continuing Education's Adult Ed program. We serve ESL, ABE, HSC, HSE, and IET. And I'm going to pass it. I'm also the president of MACAE, if you haven't noticed from all the lovely speeches through the week. I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Gardner.
Hello, everyone. I am Jendayi Gardner. I'm the executive director for the Office of Adult Education and Charter Schools for Detroit Public Schools Community District. Our program also serves high school completion, high school equivalency, and we have an awesome ESL program as well. I've been with the district going on my 21st year with DPSCD. So I'm so happy to be here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jason Evers. I'm an adult ed consultant from Wayne RESA. Wayne RESA is the fiscal agency for the Region 10 Section 107 funded programs. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm just happy to be working with Tammy and Jendayi.
So the three of us are just going to kind of bounce back and forth on each slide, so bear with us. If you have questions, please ask them right then. Don't wait till the end because we are going to be talking about so many different items. It's probably easier to address your questions right when we hit on it, okay? So we're just going to get started. Now, in the beginning, we're going to make this really quick. This presentation I did a couple of years ago with Erica Luce at, I believe, a fall conference, and we had 75 minutes. So we only have 60 minutes this time. So I'm going to kind of just run through these first couple really quick. It's just about taking some time to think about what kind of management style you have. Do you tend to find that you're constantly on the edge, being reactive and not proactive? As hard as it may seem to adjust your thought process, your scheduling, your life becomes so much easier and less stressful and more organized if you can figure out how to become more proactive, find tricks, find support. Staff is very helpful when it comes to these kinds of needs. You need to have the right staff and delegate, delegate, delegate. This is another one that you can look at when you get our slides. We will be sharing this with MACAE, so it will be on their website after the conference is over. And it's kind of a way to think about the difference between being proactive, reactive, and sometimes inactive, and what that can mean, what it makes you feel like, and what the outcomes from that can be. Like again, I'm gonna skip through these because this is something more that you want to do on your own, kind of reflective, that we'll just have you try to remember to look at later when you have time. And then being proactive is a lot of what you'll find this presentation is all about. Dr. Gardner and myself will be sharing ways that we were proactive for our monitoring that we had this year in March this month. And luckily, Jason and our Region 10 group are very helpful, and they're not out to get you. You have to always remember that. But the more prepared you are, the easier you make it for them, the easier it is for you, the better your outcomes will be. So I'm going to have Jason kind of explain Region 10 monitoring and what it is and how he selects who he selects in the process.
Hey, thank you so much, Tammy. And this is the regional program monitoring checklist we send out in advance of the monitoring. And you can see just at first look, there's a lot there. And it really what Tammy said about the spirit of this monitoring really is cooperative, and we are really coming in to take a look at program best practices and any recommendations that we can make to ensure the highest quality programming possible across the region. So this is not a gotcha kind of thing. It really is a cooperative endeavor. Once we're done with all the reviews, we'll send back a report to the district with our observations and any recommendations for those improvement recommendations. There really is no punitive element to this process. And just getting our directors comfortable and understanding that and trying to build that level of trust really goes a long way in a smooth evaluation process. So thank you for mentioning that, Tammy. So you can see on the checklist here, we've got two main sections. There's program review and fiscal review. The monitoring is done by two separate teams comprised of members from all three ISD. There's the Oakland Schools, MACAE ISD, and then Wayne RESA. Oakland and MACAE send a representative each, and then Wayne RESA, there are two of us, two part-time adult ed consultants. So there are two-person teams that review each portion of the whole schedule. And the program review typically will go to where the program is housed and look at the participant files. And then the fiscal team will typically go to a business office to review those documents. In terms of the selection process, we follow a federal model where we monitor 20% of the programs annually, so that every 5 years, we've done 100% review. Now, when we started our first round of monitoring in 2015, 2016, we had 30 provider programs in Region 10. So that made the math very simple. To review them, we would have to do 6 per year over 5 years, and we would have them all. In order to identify the programs to review, we did a rank order list based on a multi-year performance average. So we took the top 3 achieving programs, and then the 3 programs that were at the lowest level of the rank list. Those were the programs we evaluated that first year. The idea being that the high level programs, we could get some best practices. The lower achieving programs, maybe we could make some suggestions to assist in bringing up the overall regional performance. Now, we did that. Actually, instead of the 5-year process, the first go around, we did it in 4 years for 2 reasons. We did have a couple of programs stop operating during that time. And then there was indication from the State Department that they were going to change the monitoring process. So when it got to be the 4th year, we added all of the 5th year programs and just did a massive review that 5th year, so that when the monitoring process was updated, all of our programs would be on the same monitoring process. So we did not do monitoring the last 2 years because of the in-person restrictions from the pandemic, but we felt it was important to begin in-person monitoring again this year, particularly because we have a high number of new adult ed directors in the region. So we just wanted to make sure that they were being supported and really making sure that they are aware of the best practices and reporting compliance and all of that. So they were our first programs to be selected. The next set we did were programs that had recommendations from our prior reviews. And then once those positions were, or once those districts were identified, we just went right back to the top of the list and filled out our monitoring schedule. So we did monitor 3 programs this year. We just completed our activities in the last 10 days, and then we will be getting the monitoring reports out. So, excuse me. And you will see there is a lot on these sheets, and we'll definitely be going into greater detail as we move through the presentation.
And I would just like to give Jason and the Region 10 fiscal agent and liaisons kudos, because they gave us this document and let us know we were going to be monitored 6 months before our monitoring. So we didn't have to be in a panic in 1 week and try to compile all this information and get our binders ready. They gave us ample time to prepare, which was very helpful. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next slide in which we're going to start delving into each section. Actually, before we do that, Dr. Gardner is going to share her action plan.
Yes, thank you, Tammy. And so the key word for today is proactive. As Tammy just mentioned, we did give 6 months notice in advance. And I would say our team, I'll just start, I believe I have many on the in the meeting today. And if you are here, any of our wonderful DPSD adult ed teachers or our Deputy Director, Nakia Riley, we had an all hands on deck approach. And so once we got that information that we were going to be reviewed, we actually had an action plan developed. And so with that action plan, it allowed us to identify all the action items, which was driven by the checklist. We specified who was responsible, including our leadership team and our teachers, and also a completion status timeframe that actually said if it's complete, on track or not. We had working meetings every week, and then we also shared out. So if I was responsible for a specific task, I shared out in my progress, and each team member did that at each meeting. So that was the how we actually got it done, by actually having an action plan to move forward.
And I will say that we at Troy had a similar process, but it was not nearly this detailed. We met with the team that was helping with the information, and I had a lot of hand notes of who was doing which parts, and they would take their parts and get it done. But hers is a much better example of keeping it very organized and detailed.
Thank you.
And then if you want to continue, Dr. Gardner, with the binders, we do binders as well. Binders, we have been told by the region, are the most helpful way to share your information.
Yes, and just a shout out to Tammy. This goes back to the essence from yesterday. It was mentioned multiple times how MACAE is a team that support one another. Tammy and also Patrick met with myself and other members of my team to kind of give us an overview of what to expect. And this was a recommendation that Tammy shared were the binders. We actually have pictures of the binders we use that were actually developed by our compliance specialist, Jackie Sims. So you see we have a binder for the program review and the binder for the fiscal review. And so it includes all the items on the checklist along with evidence. And so that was very important. I talked about the progress report meetings and with our team members, the binder development, and the last piece was essential. So after we actually completed our binders, we actually became the program reviewers. We sat down, we had our binder, we had the checklist. We went through the checklist and checked off if we had it or not. And that allowed us to actually go back and put more evidence in our binder to make sure it was crystal clear that we hit every single thing on that checklist. So I do highly recommend that after you compile your evidence, that you serve as the reviewer and do a mock review and make any adjustments so you're ready for the final review.
And it was brought up earlier, there will be some items that you have digitally now that you can just print a sample page to put in the binder as like a placeholder. And then if they want to go actually see your digital files, you can have those readily available to open up. But for us, we just put like a sample of here's our email chains or here's our Google spreadsheet. And it wasn't the live, obviously, but that way they could just see that we had a process electronically. So don't be afraid that you have to print out every single thing that you had digital. The participant files, you will have to print out certain things from your digital file, but only for those specific students. You don't have to print out everything for the whole year. So don't be afraid of just putting samples in the binder for those digital pages that you have.
Tammy, there was a question about organization and how you organize that online.
How we organize what online?
Folder.
Like all of your data. Catherine said, how should electronic files be kept as far as how they're organized?
So I have amazing data staff. I have amazing data staff that have Google spreadsheets for attendance or know how to quickly get into CASAS for our post-testing and pre-testing results because we do all of our testing online now too. So they were there. You want to make sure that critical staff is there the day of the monitoring so that they could go in and pull the specific things needed and show them where it is. So that's pretty easy to prepare for in advance. You just have to know where they lie and print some samples of what it looks like.
If I can also add, the first item on this slide talks about a shared folder. So we have a SharePoint document and like a hub site. And so we actually had all of our files in that shared folder. So we can actually see electronically and kind of just dump our evidence on that shared file. So I think whatever system you have for your program that you actually can have that shared folder system going on, that can also help organize items electronically.
And Whitney, yes, MACAE is always willing to help programs. MACAE also has strategic planning, a sidebar. MACAE is willing to come out, Patrick specifically, to do strategic planning for you and your programs. And I did it last year, and it was wonderful for my staff to be able to take a deep dive that wasn't led by me. I could actually be like on the team instead of being the leader. I get tired of hearing, your voice all the time. And who doesn't like Patrick, right? So it's a great way to get your team engaged and in a way that's not led by you. So you can actually participate. Sidebar ends. Okay. So we're going to start showing samples of what you need in your binders. And Dr. Gardner and Jason, please feel free to interject as needed. Some of these that seem a little more self-explanatory, I'm going to go faster through unless we see that there are specific questions. So Whitney will just interrupt us as we go. So as far as the handbooks, you'll see some of the specific examples that they're looking for. We had some of this, our student policies for equal opportunity and non-discrimination were actually online as part of the online registration process now. They actually check off that they've read and understand the process. So that was one I just had to print a page as a sample and put in the binder because it doesn't actually live as a paper product anymore. It's all online. So that's a perfect example of, as long as you can show them where the students actually find it and you put a sample in your binder, that's all they're looking for, is to make sure that it exists and it's accessible to students, staff, and customers. Did you want to add anything here, Dr. Gardner or Jason?
I think it's to ensure that I know with our staff and our student handbooks, with our binders, we made sure it was included and it was actually easy to find. So I think that's something, we had a table of contents so you know exactly what page to go to. We just want to make sure it's nothing you have to search for.
Yeah, we had tabs for every section so that it was easy. Because some of the pages and some of the evidence does get a little long for certain parts. And you want to make it easy for them to flip to the next section and be able to check it off their list. Okay. The organizational chart is pretty self-explanatory. There's many different ways you can share this. This is an example of a chart that I had done, and it only looks this colorful because I also used it for a board presentation. Otherwise, it wouldn't have looked this pretty. No offense to our region monitoring process, but you don't have to make it look this nice for the binder. It just was because I was already using it for more than one need. The teacher certifications that you can find in MOEX, that's what's really most important that they're looking for in this section. And it's really easy to go in by name and just print that page that shows their that they're active and when their certification expires. That's all they're really looking for there. Jason, were there any issues with that you came across when you did monitoring? Anything, any tips maybe?
Nothing other than what you just mentioned about just print that MOEX page out for each one of your instructors. There were some that thought it was going to be that random selection. So for us, we just wanted to see all of the teachers. And I think it's, as long as it's easy enough to do, just print them out for all of the instructors.
So this is for all teachers. When he's talking about random selection, he's talking about the student participant files that they search through. So for this section, it's for all teachers. Okay. And then we got to the participant files. The 10 random files will be chosen, and you just have to be prepared if it's electronic that they will give you time to pull those electronic documents and print them for the students selected. Dr. Gardner, do you want to talk more about this?
Yes, I think it was very important to make sure that you already have these items in place. And so when it's asked for, you know exactly where to go. I think it was good that we actually did this while they're reviewing the other documents. So it's kind of simultaneously happening. So again, just making sure whoever's over that part in your program, that they're available at that time. And they know where to actually pull the documents.
Jason, were there any specific tips or concerns or challenges with this section that you would like to share?
So yeah, this is probably the most time consuming portion of the program review. And with so many of our providers having their ALP done digitally or in electronic format, that is something that adds to the time consumption, having those printed out. So one of the things we are considering is going and identifying the 10 random participants prior to the monitoring and supplying those ahead of time so that they can be ready for us. I know that sort of takes out the spot check element of it, but really the idea is that we're just making sure that everything is complete. But that might sort of help streamline that process a little. And I will just touch a quick note on the transcripts. So we are looking for transcripts mainly for the high school completion or high school diploma participants. And I mean, if transcripts are available for the ESL or ABE programs, if the ABE program, their ultimate goal will be high school completion, then we should get them. But you will also see later on in our best practices, sometimes it's difficult to get transcripts from the participants' former school. So if that happens, we've just asked providers to put the transcript request in the folder, so we know that the request was made, but they're not available from the previous school.
And if you want to talk
add here. So I think that was very important. So for like our ABE and high school equivalency students, we definitely had our transcripts for the high school completion. So having that form for if they don't have their transcript, it was definitely something we can add as evidence that we're actually checking for that requirement as well.
And we will be sharing a transcript waiver form later in the presentation. So Jason, I'm going to have you lead the curriculum review piece, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we'll want to get a look at the curriculum that's being used by content area, instructional level. We'll also want to see some evidence that the curriculum has been reviewed periodically, suggest annual review, and just that it's been reviewed for alignment to the standards, and that it is still appropriate for the instructional level that it's being used for. And now each district does their curriculum review somewhat differently. We've seen some that are at the board level, with the district level curriculum committee. We've seen some that are reviewed annually at a department level within the adult ed school itself. And I think that's all I have for the curriculum review.
Any questions on the curriculum review before we move on? Most programs, at least in staff meetings or annual strategic planning, review this. So that's all you need to show is that it was on your staff meeting agenda, that you reviewed it, or that it was part of maybe a survey, for a reflection for your staff for the year, something like to that. It's nothing too intimidating.
I will say and I'll give another shout out to my Deputy Director, Dakia Riley. She compiled a very thorough document that actually highlights each of the curriculum resources that we use for each of ABE, high school equivalency, high school completion, our ESL population, like what curriculum we're using and what resources specifically are we using. And I think that was a really thorough document provided in our binder.
Yes, and I'll add on to that. So during our process, we had our ESL coordinator, Ms. Carol Maynard, who might be on here. Woohoo! She shared, we have Google Classrooms for each ESL group and our AHA group. So she went through and showed in the Google Classroom the curriculum, and then she also brought in some samples of the workbooks we use. So she actually did like a little mini presentation in regards to our curriculum during the monitoring. So it's not something that you have to print out all of your curriculum, as long as you can show them where it resides and when it's been updated. So now we're on to data tracking. And basically they just want policies and procedures for each of these areas. And it's as simple as writing a paragraph or a page, depending on how much you want to break it down. in regards to how you are tracking each of these areas. These areas are all very important to your funding and to the state's performance measures. So these are areas that you should have some kind of process in place already. And if you've just never, documented it, this is a great opportunity to sit down and actually put it in writing. I will be honest, not all of these, we didn't have all of these like in writing documented somewhere exactly how we did it. We knew we were doing it and we would monitor the reports, make sure we were doing it, but we never actually documented our process. So I was very fortunate that my registration coordinator took the time and had the patience to actually write all of this out for us in a shared document. I think we have a sample on the next screen. So
And
yes, so Dr. Gardner,
if I can add, having that in written policy or written procedure is really helpful, especially if there's turnover in the district. If your main data person leaves or the director retires, having these procedures written out sort of step by step can be really helpful for new folks who are coming on.
I think that's a great segue, Jason, because I will say that we did have to develop quite a bit in regards to the policies and procedures. Again, they were in place, they were enacted, but nothing was in writing. So I think that was very important. And another thing, we took it a step further. In addition to just having the policy written, we also had evidence. So you see in front of you a sample from our follow-up surveys procedure and policy. We actually had a sample of what our teachers did last year, where they actually took time during their seminar time, which is typically used to provide like services support to students. They actually took the time to actually complete the follow-up calls in order for us to actually complete the survey. So we actually included that spreadsheet that showed each of our teachers and which students that they actually contacted and what the responses were based on the script that we provided to them regarding the questions that need to be answered. So again, all hands on deck approach. Our students were very involved. And very important also to have that evidence behind each of your policies as well.
So do you want to share specifics about this example?
Sure. So again, the follow-up surveys, it just talks about what we are expected to do in regards to those surveys and answering the questions and making sure we actually have that. This is a requirement in regards to mayors. So typically when you do your closeout of your mayor, so it was very important. I know last year we actually, again, had our teachers to be very involved. This year we're being more proactive. We did a lot. And again, the electronic ALPs is very helpful because it has the data matching if you put in the social security numbers. So last year we didn't have as many, so we had more calls to make. This year we have so many more. And so it does not allow us to have to make so many calls. So I think this policy here just allowed us to see, okay, what is necessary? What do we have to do? So if there's any calls we have to make, we already have it already specified what needs to take place. So just speaking exactly to this policy here.
Jason, there's a question about how long you have to keep certain files. If I recall, like as long as it's not a transcript or a diploma, isn't it 7 years?
Yeah, I believe that's true. We would want to get LEO confirmation, but it's my understanding, and the way it's written is kind of funny. It's like 6 years and a semester, but essentially, if you kept the record for 7 years, you would be covered.
We're going to move to the next. So this section is about how you can prepare for the checklist as far as showing samples of your formal staff evaluation, student feedback, program evaluation. And this is where if you do surveys or have your students do exit reflection surveys, any way that you're getting information from your staff and students as far as how your program is working for them, that is what they're looking for here. So everyone does it a little different. Even between my ESL and my ABE, it's different, right? Depending on the students and the level that they can answer. My ESL level 1, their answers are with like smiley face, frowny face, straight face. We actually use pictures, where obviously with level 3, we're actually, asking them to answer, agree, disagree, do not agree. So some are online. I use a Google survey for my staff. Some they do paper and pen before they leave the class. It's really up to you how it best works for you. I don't know, Dr. Gardner, did you want to share how you guys do a little bit of that before we go to the other sample?
Most definitely. So I'll start with the formal staff evaluations, just specifying, I know for our district, we use Thrive. So it's whatever tool that you're specified to use in order to evaluate your teachers and leadership team. The student feedback, we actually have a new data manager, and she actually contacted our previous graduates and got feedback about our program. It was very helpful to kind of get from them that they've gone through the program, they've been successful, what are some the feedback to actually help the program become stronger, and what do they appreciate about the program. And for the last item, program evaluation, I do want to highlight the agendas and minutes. It's very important when you have your staff meetings that you actually have an agenda and actually have minutes taken. I know we have one of our clericals that attends all of our staff meetings, they take minutes. And so that was evidence we provided in our binder as well. In making sure in your agendas and minutes, it shows how to use that feedback to improve your program. So I think it's all tied together, but it's about getting better and stronger as a program using that feedback.
Jason, anything to add here before we go to a sample?
No, just thank you, Dr. Gardner, for the highlighting the need to keep the communication records and discussion records through the agendas and minutes, because that's really the key point of the data review is what are you going to do with it? How will it drive instruction, and how will you use that to improve your program? So thank you for highlighting that.
So I'm going to have Dr. Gardner lead this slide as well. This is an example of how they use that data and how they take those surveys and make determinations on programs. Would you like to share your all about? And at some point in the fall, she's going to do a MACAE fall conference presentation on her dashboard so we can all have one.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. I love data. So the keynote, I was really intrigued by all the data. So when I joined the Adult Ed program mid last year, one of the things I did bring to the program was just a laser-like focus on data. And so we actually have data dashboards that we share at our staff meetings on a monthly basis. And as you see here, we focus on our funding formula for Region 10. We have our post-test data that we tracked, our measurable skill gains, and also our enrollment data. And this is something that we talked about and we met every month. We had robust discussions about. I'm so proud of our teachers because this year they are actually owning this data. They're talking about the data, they're leading conversations about the data. And so it's just really great to see the growth. But this actually was evidence in the binder because it asks you for how to use data. And so this right here is just a dashboard that we use and what we highlight in order to actually make decisions to see where our deficiencies are, areas that we're doing great in, and also how it ties to our funding. And so having this as a continuous conversation throughout the school year, so we have no surprises. So this is an example of one we had from last year. Very vital to have these conversations on a consistent basis with all team members of your team.
And I would just like to jump on board with one important key fact that Dr. Gardner brought up. Your teachers need to be involved with the data. As soon as we made the student growth a percentage of their teacher evaluation, all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, what does that mean? Wait, why is that? Why do I lose this point? Or whatever, depending on how you do your evaluation. And now every semester they're looking at their pre and post tests and they're looking at their gains and they're looking at the other MSG possibilities to get those gains. And they understand a little better how it all works as far as the big picture. They have to, in my evaluation, 20% is on their own classroom growth and 20% is as a team on our program. So that they kind of hold each other accountable as well. Because now 40% of your teacher evaluations are supposed to be student growth driven. So just keep that in mind. If you're not quite there yet, that's one way to get the teachers involved very quickly is make it impact their evaluations. And all of a sudden they're going to be very interested in data. So I'm going to show an example of my TCE Google survey that I use for my staff. It's very easy to create, especially once you've created it, because I just copy and paste and change the questions as needed. So here's an example. And what's great about this is once you send them the link to complete it, it deals with how staff treat each other. Do they feel safe in the building? Do they feel they're getting what they need from the supervisors and coordinators? Is everyone respectful? It's a general overall program evaluation, but also has specific questions in regards to how am I doing? how are my coordinators doing? So it is anonymous. If they want, they can add their name at the bottom to have more in-depth conversation about a specific comment they might have. But I'm trying to remember, I don't even remember how many questions it is. It goes pretty quickly because they just click through. It seems long, but it's really not for once a year, because I'm trying to get program, student, and staff, information from the staff. They have open, long answer questions that they can fill in their own feedback or improvement, and their name, like I said, is optional. So it is a way to get honest results. Sometimes your staff is going to be a little afraid to be honest with you if it's something they might have a concern or a challenge with. So that's the only way you can really get some real honest feedback, is to make it anonymous. So then once they fill it out, your responses, you can look at a summary where it tells you for each question how you're doing. And obviously all of ours are very high, so that's great. Or if you want to look at a specific question, or you can go and look at each individual response, because maybe someone made a comment and you want to see how that impacted how they answered the other questions, even though you don't know who that person is. Sometimes you still want to go into the individual results to try to find some patterns. This is just a Google survey. Actually, it's not even under surveys. I think it's just a Google form that I use, because if you go to like actual surveys, it's a kind of a pain, and I think sometimes you have to pay for that. But this is free in Google. And once you have it set up, you just copy and save a copy each year, update it as you need, and send out the link. I have found that has been a lifesaver for me. All right, so now I got to stop sharing this and reshare. Oh, why did it not take me back to where I ended? All right, we'll get there. Sorry, guys. Any questions on that part of the checklist as far as evaluation, surveys, feedback? All right, we will move on. Jason, were there any concerns with that? Was everyone able to reflect student, staff, and program reviews?
Oh, yeah. We saw very good evidence across the board for districts doing that. And I think it does provide very valuable information. I did want to talk a little bit about the sharing of the data. Jendayi's dashboard is awesome and really looks great. And I know that this is shared with as part of their regular staff meetings. But in talking with some of our other programs that are maybe a little smaller, that have teachers who are teaching, say, in K-12 during the day and then teaching part-time in the evening, they're just having a hard time finding time to hold a meeting, or having the energy left over at the end of the day to have a meeting. So one of the things that we were talking about is putting their having sort of virtual staff meetings and using a shared drive format similar to your Google survey, where they can put the data in, share the data, maybe a dashboard like Dr. Gardner uses, and then give each teacher opportunity to view and add their comments, so that they can have some level of dialogue around the data if they're unable to meet face to face or even in real time together. It's not optimum, but I think it's the beginning of those data discussions for schools that don't have the professional learning communities or are stretched for teacher time.
Well, and I will say for those that maybe don't love data as much as Dr. Gardner, or are a little intimidated by trying to create a dashboard like this, if you go into MARES and just pull like the EFL performance snapshot and the MSG summary, you can share those with your staff, and it breaks it down by ABE and ESL and level, and they can pretty much figure out, okay, I'm an ESL level 1 teacher, so this is where I'm making an impact, or I'm an ABE level. And those are very helpful to use, and your data person, or usually you have access to MARES and can pull those. I share those at my staff meetings regularly, usually in the beginning and the end of the year. The beginning of the year shows the end of last year, because we finally have all the data in. And usually like halfway through to see, okay, how do we do with our fall? By January, we have our first post test done. let's see how we did going into the next semester. So you don't have to create your own, but by creating your own, like Dr. Gardner did, you can really focus in on areas of to celebrate and to improve upon. And like I said, she's going to share how she does that dashboard in the fall, I hope. This is just a sample of a best practice for a transcript waiver. When you can't get a transcript for a student, have them sign a waiver, and that's all you need. You don't need to keep trying to hunt for a transcript for a student. Now, if they're high school completion and they can't get you anything, then they got to start from scratch. So usually they're going to try pretty hard. But if they're high school equivalency or they're going into IET and they aren't really on that diploma track, this waiver will cover the requirement. All right, Jason, I'm going to have you lead. This is the summary of the fiscal monitoring process. If you want to give us the summary before we go into some best practices.
Yeah, sure. So when our fiscal team arrives, they'll be looking at all of your budget revenue sources. We'll take a look at the transaction ledgers, expenditure reports, all of the, take a deeper dive into some personnel documentation and into the purchase trails to, sort of identify equipment or supply purchases from the ordering to the receiving to how it's logged into inventory, and just to see that whole process. And I think I think our next portion, our next slide is related to the inventory. And I know this is Dr. Gardner's from Detroit. And this is just a perfect example of what an inventory sheet needs to look like. It's got the ID number for the item, where it's located, who they purchased it from, a description, the date of the purchase order that it came from, the funding source, the cost, and the rationale for having it. So that helps us quickly identify where, say they bought computers last year. We can quickly identify where these Dell computers are located, how many there are, and it just helps keep track of the inventory. And then, of course, having it, the designation of the funding source lets you know if it's state funds or federal funds that it was purchased with, and the various rules that those fall under.
I would also add another piece is, I know in DPSED, we have 9 different locations. And so you have various locations in your program to make sure you have each of them represented in your inventory. So I see we have 2 career centers represented here. So it's very important to make sure it is truly reflective of your program when you have your inventory.
I'm just going to keep moving along. So PARs have always been fun, because before I started being a director and got monitored, I didn't even know what a personal activity report was, I'll be honest. I was like, what do we need? What is this? And it was really time consuming when we had to do PARs as a separate document every month. Any person who works for you that is in multiple funding sources had to fill out, this is what percentage of their role was out of this funding source and out of this one. And then Sam, before he left the state office, helped us work together to create a timesheet that could do our payroll needs as well as that PAR need. And all it meant was taking your timesheet and adding the funding source to it so that it would represent their daily activity broken down by funding source without needing that separate document. Because some of your staff are in more than one funding source, some of them are not and didn't need to do this. Who needed it? Who didn't? Did you get them all in for every month through the year? It was a nightmare. So this has made our lives much easier. There's 2 different examples of timesheets. You could probably take yours and amend it to work as well. This one, and then this is an example of ours that we use in Troy. And again, all I had to do, I already had all of this. I already had where they chose what their role was. I just had to add this funding source column, and all of a sudden it resolved my needs for that PAR. Jason or Dr. Gardner, do you have any more to add about the lovely PAR requirement? That is a federal grant requirement, if I'm not mistaken, for
Correct.
all programs that have federal grant dollars, correct?
So it is a requirement for federally funded positions, and I think it's just the best practice for to use in general, because what it also does is it helps tie back the actual activity report to the budget or the expenditures, so that there's just additional documentation. If, say, you have a staff member who is in the budget as half-time funded through 107, then we can further document that they spent half of their time in 107 related activities with the PAR.
Tammy, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Someone just asked for a copy of mine. If you just email me, I can share it. This is an example of a semi-annual certification for those that are not in more than one funding source. And I'm going to let Dr. Gardner take over this one. This is also a federal requirement.
Yes, so this document here, I have to actually certify. And so it is sent to me and specify actually for split funded. So it may not be specifically for the federal, but if they're split funded, I have to actually certify and actually, and this is on a monthly basis. And I have to sign it and submit it. And so this is the form we use. It allows us to actually list all of the personnel that's impacted by it. And then I have to actually submit it to our finance department. It's actually an electronic way that we actually submit ours. So this is the certification process that we utilize for DPSE.
And I believe there is, like, if you go and if you search semi-annual certifications, there are templates available online.
Correct.
Everyone's saying they want copies. You're gonna have to email me because I'm not gonna remember by Monday.
Will do. All right, so
then,
right here, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. I was just gonna say, and Dr. Gardner is gonna share their growth and celebration process.
Yes, I was so excited to say this is a very important slide. I definitely, as a leader, like to practice a growth mindset. And I believe every experience we have helps to get better. And so this image here was actually selected by our Deputy Director, Dr. Kia Riley. It just says growth is one of the hallmark of a living thing. You have to continue to grow. And so basically this process, as Jason stated at the beginning, is not a punitive process or I got you process. It's about how can you improve your program to become better and the best. And so once we got the feedback at our, after we sat around the table as a team, we actually had grows and glows. So grows are the areas we can improve in, and then glows are our highlights, which we have many of them. And so what we did is from our grows and glows that we got from the reviewers, we actually had a separate meeting as a team with my fiscal team. We talked about the grows and glows and what we're going to do next. With our program side, we talked about the grows and glows, what we're going to do next as well. And I participated in multiple audits. I also work with the charter schools office. And one thing I've learned from an auditor or reviewer is that you should already know what your goals are. And so we knew what our goals are going to be. And so already had a plan in our place in our binders and okay, we know this is something we need to work on. This is our plan already, we've implemented. So I would say definitely do that self-reflection prior to the reviewers coming in and actually have that separate meeting to reflect on, okay, the feedback, how can we improve? So again, grows and glows. Tammy, anything from you in regards to grows and glows for your program?
Yeah, so we haven't done our grows and glows yet because we're waiting till we get the formal response from the region with our letter. And then I'm thinking that's going to lead to a nice end of year staff celebration that will include those grows and glows. We also already knew where we needed to grow. And we had already put in some things this year to help correct some areas where it was like, oh, during COVID, when we moved this online, we didn't add that to the custom fields online where we're not getting that same information. And so the monitoring process is actually a really positive process. It is a cooperative process, but it can really help you find where you might be missing information that you really will need, not just for monitoring, but to help keep your programs up to date and to know your data to help improve for your student success. So don't look at it. I mean, it's always nerve-wracking, right? Anytime anyone's going to assess your program that you're responsible for or that you're a part of, or it's nerve-wracking. No matter how well prepared you are, you're going to be nervous that day, and that's okay. That means you care. I would be worried if you weren't nervous because it means you don't care. So it's okay to be nervous, but just know it's not meant to be a punishment. It's not meant, they're not going to take money away from you for something unless there's something illegal, obviously. You know, it's meant to help you improve and to make sure that you're able to brag about those marks that you are hitting. You can't share your success if you don't have the data to back it up. So it's just a way to get you to, you know, take that time to compile information and be cognizant of what you're actually doing and be proud. I just want to check the chat. How long is the turnover? Mary Jo, I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
The results. How long does it take from when they monitor you till you get your blows and
Jason,
growth?
when do we get our letter?
Yeah, so as just as quickly as I can take the information from the reviewers, compile it, and then make the report. It's probably taking a little longer now than it normally would. We're a little short-staffed, and I am a tick behind on some of my workflow here. But you know, when we finish the monitoring, we generally have a meeting with the director and the coordinator, or whoever all was involved on the district side of the monitoring, and we can share some preliminary information. So there's you'll have an idea of at least what the flavor of the review sheet will look like, or what the comments will be. So I'm hoping to have those two out to the districts. Now, Tammy, I know you said it would be an end of the year celebration. I'm hoping not to have it. I'm hoping to have it to you well before the end of the year, but in the
well, we meet in like May, so I think we should have it by then.
Yeah, you will probably next week or the following. And I would, if I can, and while we're talking about grows and glows, there's so I just want to comment on this presentation, and this is was organized by Tammy, and just to talk about the monitoring process. And it was suggested that we have a new director participate in this presentation just to share their experiences about what it was like as a new director to go through this monitoring process for the first time. And it's just absolutely exciting that we have Dr. Gardner both as a new director going through this process for the first time, and so much of her good work being shown as best practices within the region. So I just want to further congratulate Dr. Gardner and her team for all of the efforts and all of the good work that they have put into the data collection and documenting all of this monitoring process. Just my hats off to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And yes, it's definitely a team effort. We have an awesome team at DPSED, our teachers, our leadership team, our support staff. If you're here, if you come on video, I believe there are a lot of them are in this room. So thank you so much, Jason. This was a wonderful process to go through as a new director. I've learned quite a bit, and I thank Tammy for just being a great mentor. I've already tagged you as my mentor. Definitely, and just being a great example. So thank you so much for that feedback.
And for all of you out there, just know now that she's got her first year under her belt, we are going to be pressuring her to do a little more with MACAE and being part of that MACAE team to support other new directors and directors in general, because you've got some really good best practices to share with everyone. So kudos to you in your first year. Look at you.
Thank you.
I don't know why I muted myself. This is where we were going to leave it open. We have 5 minutes. We can do some question and answer. If anyone else who had been monitored has some input they would like to share. If there's other regions that have done monitoring and they want to share how it's different or the same as our regions, the floor is now open.
So
Hi, this is Joanna from Dearborn. My question is the, hold on a second. I apologize. My mom thought I was talking to her. The charm of working from home, right? So, is the state looking to do monitoring soon, and would they be following this format? Tammy, I know you said something at the beginning, they check with you about what the Region 10 monitoring is.
They came to, yeah, Jason, I don't know if Brian shared more with you on that. They came to one of our days of monitoring in Region 10 to kind of see and as a model. That checklist that we use was originally a state checklist years ago, so I would imagine it would probably be very similar to that. But Jason, did Brian share any other information with you?
No, nothing new. And in fact, this was just the checklist this year was just an adaptation of the previous checklist. I think I had talked in the beginning about how the State Department was going to update their monitoring process. That hasn't happened yet. But I wouldn't, no, we don't have any new information as to what it'll look like moving forward, but I wouldn't be surprised if it looks very similar to what is existing already.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I would just like to point out that this was an eye opener for me, like just all the things that go into an audit. And like as a teacher who is looking to hopefully one day move into leadership, this is just a big preparation. So I just want to say thank you.
Yes, Christian, we see you. We're ready for you to help with some advocacy. I've seen some of your comments on some of the other on the other sessions. We're ready for you to jump on board and get active. But I won't steal you, I promise. Other people want to steal you. I'm not going to steal you. I'm going to borrow you. Is that okay, Dr. Gardner?
That is okay.
Anybody else?
I want to participate more, but the thing is, I teach during the daytime, and yeah, and there's meetings at 9, 10, and that's when I have class.
Well, sometimes legislative events are in the evening, so we'll find a way to work you in.
Oh,
We'll make it happen. Yeah. We'll find a way. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Otherwise, we can end 2 minutes early so you can get a coffee, a pop, start lunch. I think lunch is next, right? Oh,
I have a question.
Yes,
this is
go ahead.
Audrine Williams. I am with a nonprofit organization, and just for clarification, because I think I know the answer, we're looking for the same type of auditing prep that we just reviewed from every funded person, funded group.
I would think that you would be monitored by the state because you're not, if you don't have section 107, you're not within the region's section to monitor. But if the state ends up taking on a similar form as Region 10, then I would say that you're going to probably be held responsible to a lot of the same documentation. If you don't do high school completion, then the transcript piece isn't going to qualify. Right. You know what I mean? So it'll just kind of depend on what your program does, which pieces of it. But I would imagine for the WIOA only providers that it's going to be something very similar to that.
Okay. And that's what I was, I
don't know for sure, but that would be my educated guess.
I understand. I'm a former DPS staff person, adult ed. So, but I was just wondering, the parts that reflect on the nonprofit organization would be the parts that we need to work on. So, yes. Thank you.
And you would need to share, usually they want you to share all your funding sources. So even though it was like a regional audit through section 107, we had to share our tuition grants, our WIO, our IALC, all. So you would have a lot of, being a nonprofit, you probably have other funding sources that they may want you to share as well.
Okay.
So things like that will be consistent, just different than the list we gave. Your list will be a little different as far as funding sources.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tammy, Jason, and Jendayi for sharing so much information with us. This was helpful to me, and I know it was helpful to so many others. All of this information will be made available after the conference ends. I want to remind you to fill out that sketch form at the end of the day today if you need sketches. And we are going to take lunch until 1 o'clock. And then we've got 2 sessions left this afternoon. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for being a great host, Whitney.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Whitney.
You're welcome.